What do you think about when you hear the name Samson?
Here we are outside of Bet Shemesh. This is the area of Tzoah where Samson was born and raised and eventually was buried.
Many of us think about Samson, we think about a really strong, talented guy who falls asleep on the lap of the wrong girl. Next thing he knows, he's blind and weak and grinding wheat for his enemies to eat. And this is not the destiny that God had planned for him, but he was indeed gifted. So what can we learn from this guy's life? Who was Samson? This is the traditional grave of Samson. The biblical account tells us that Samson was buried with his father, so you have the grave of Manoah, his father, with him. Let's take a deeper look at Samson's life and try and see what lessons that we can learn from this great man's life. So this calling of the Nazarite, what exactly did it mean? Well, for one, you couldn't have anything that comes from the vine, not from the seed to the skin. Everything associated with the grape, even vinegar made from wine, was not permissible to the Nazarite. Second of all, you couldn't come in contact with any dead thing, no corpse, not even for the sake of burying a close relative. You were not able to participate in anything associated with that which was dead. Otherwise you'd become defiled and it would break your vow. So those were the things that caused a Nazarite to be separate. The last thing was the issue that you couldn't cut your hair. No razor was to hit your head in any way. So that was something where if you had grown out your hair for a long period of time, it was a symbol that everybody else around you could see that, oh yeah, he's a Nazarite, he's still under a vow. And usually it was for a set time period. In other words, when they saw that you finally had a haircut, it was a visible reminder that you are no longer, you had fulfilled your vow and you're no longer a Nazarite. Now early on in Samson's life, he's confronted by a lion and he rips the lion apart with the strength that God has given him. But later on, he passes by that same way and he discovers that there's some bees that have made a beehive in the carcass. And he discovers honey. He was hungry, so he just opens up the lion, takes some honey, and eats of it. So he's already coming in contact with that which is dead, which is one of the big no-nos. The second thing is he goes down and he marries one of the Philistine girls. And he has a week-long party, and they bring 30 Philistine companions to be with him during this week. And during that time, it's very hard for me to believe that the Philistines would understand that he had an inability to drink wine or have anything associated with that which comes from the vine. So here we have strike number 2. Then finally you have Delilah. Years later, he basically falls for the wrong girl. And Delilah lulls him to sleep and gets out of him the secret of his strength. And the only thing that remains to keep him separate and dedicated to the Lord is the issue of his hair. He's already defiled himself in the other ways, but once he loses his hair, it's the final thing that separates him from the rest of those around him. He's no longer separate, and losing your hair was the visible sign that your anointing has come to an end.
So after Delilah lulls Samson to sleep and has his hair cut, then she wakes him up and says, "The Philistines are on you, Samson." So he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as before, as at other times, and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Then the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza, and they bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. So in the end, what is it that we can learn from Samson's life? Here was a guy who had giftings and a calling and anointing to begin to deliver the children of Israel from the hand of their oppressor. But the calling of being separate, the one who was visibly to be separated from those around him, that he didn't recognize and value. And it ended up causing his blindness and his early death. Now God has a calling on our lives as well, and we have to recognize that his calling is contingent on us recognizing the fact that he calls us to be visibly separate from the world around us. You cannot live like the world and enter into God's calling. It just will not happen. So choose this day the calling of God in your life. Make a commitment to not fulfill the short-term satisfactions of this life, but to enter into the eternal satisfaction of knowing that you've been a good and faithful servant.